bond get created? What magic does a narcissist or psychopathic person use to trap you, someone intelligent, well-functioning, who's been successful, in a trauma bond? Well, today we're going to get into what is a trauma bond, how you got trapped in a trauma bond. Maybe you're not even for sure if you are in one. And if you stick around, I'm going to actually give you a quiz to find out if you're trauma bonded. And then what to do to break a trauma bond. I'm going to give you some step-by-step tactics and strategies to break the trauma bond that you're in. And I'm so excited to join you today. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I'm a retired psychologist with over 25 years of counseling, but I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. So I have been trauma bonded, and I can tell you I am thrilled to have said that I have broken my trauma bond. And I can even tell you how I know I've broken a trauma bond is because I forget this person ever existed. They just feel like a distant dream to me. I have a lot of apathy or indifference about them. And that's what I would like to have for you. I would like to help you get to the same point in this by us talking about trauma bonds and what happens in trauma bonds. So thank you so much for joining me today. I want to describe what is a trauma bond, because we hear that word and it can sound kind of almost weird, like what does it actually mean? But a trauma bond is an attachment, a powerful attachment that you have that forms between you and an abusive person. And what happens that makes it so powerful is that it hijacks your nervous system and your thought patterns so that you alternate between fear of the abuse, of the threats, of the criticism, and relief when they show you affection, they give you promises, and you experience moments of calmness. And over time, you learn that the absence of abuse is love and safety, and this creates an emotional dependence. So you work towards calm and absence of abuse instead of what really should be happening, which is love. So they use mind control tactics, and the control tactics that they use that are very successful are isolation, where they actually cut you off from supportive people. They use gaslighting, where they warp your sense of yourself, your emotional experiences, your perception, even your sense of reality. They use intermittent reinforcement to reward compliance. And because it's so unpredictable, it keeps you really hooked. It's a lot like a slot machine. Think of Las Vegas and a slot machine. And that is the most addicting kind of a reward pattern possible. They also induce incredible confusion by giving you contradictory messages so that you end up not for sure what's true. And you start to look to them, the abuser, for clarity, which is a big trap. They become both the person who injures you, but they also become the person who comforts you. And then there's this relief from the fear. After all this tension, you experience these brief experiences of kindness. And because they show up in a kind way, it deepens the connection that you have. So I'd love to be able to talk about this further. Be sure to like, and maybe you know someone today who's struggling that needs to hear this. So please consider sharing this live with them. This might be exactly where they're at and what they're battling. And I'd love to be able to have you help them by sharing this. But also be sure to like this page today, to consider following me, but also be sure to share it with somebody who may need to hear this. Years ago, and I know I'm dating myself, but I remember when Patty Hearst got kidnapped. She was an heiress to a large fortune, and she ended up staying with them long enough that they showed her enough affection and care, despite also threatening her and threatening her safety, that she became attached to them, and she started to develop sympathy for them. And this is a similar process that happens to us when we're in this relationship. We learn in these relationships that our survival is based upon that abusive person's mood, and we start to adjust our behaviors accordingly. And any type of small act of kindness or consideration feels disproportionately meaningful. It becomes very magnified, and we're grateful for it. And that increases the attachment or the bond. And we find ourselves starting to defend them, to justify why they're the way that they are. We even may align with them as some kind of subconscious strategy to reduce the danger. I remember I did that. I found myself justifying his odd behavior with other people that I felt sort of embarrassed about. I found myself trying to explain to other people, make him seem more logical so that my connection to him seemed more logical. So you may find yourself really falling in. In fact, I even started liking some of the music he liked. And when he talked about certain kind of movies he was into, because he was really big into movies, I found myself also equally interested in those too. I wanted anything to maintain that connection with him so that I felt aligned. So I didn't feel so at jeopardy with him. So I would love to know, we're going to get into whether or not you have a trauma bond. We're going to ask you a quiz. So in preparation of that, you might want to find a piece of paper and pencil because you're going to have to score it. Because I'm going to ask you these questions, and when we get to the scoring stage, they're worth either 1, 2, or 3. So you're going to want some way to keep track of your answers. So consider before we get there, finding a piece of pen and paper so that you can score it when we hit this test. But there are 8 stages of a trauma bond. The first is, of course, the fabulous part that we don't know that we're being set up, and that is the love bombing and the idealization. And at the first, they really overwhelm us. I remember him showing up, not with the grocery roses, but I could tell they're hothouse roses. He planned these incredible dates. It just felt magical. I had never had that kind of attention before. It was very, very powerful. And this works because it creates an emotional high, and they do some things during that love bombing phase that actually increases the rate of trust. You believe that they're like you. They kind of create a past that's similar to yours, even though you may say, hey, I went to University of Chicago. They may have only been in Chicago. They may have never even been near the campus of University of Chicago, but suddenly they're like, oh, isn't that green so cool? And that clock on the grounds was really amazing. And they may have somehow just kind of known about it. Maybe they even did a little bit of research about you in the background. And when they say that, you'll think, oh, they were there like me. And you start to picture them going to classes when they actually never went. And then they'll say things like, start to paint the future. I can't wait till the day that we do this together. You really love going to the beaches, and we should take a long resort trip and on the coast of Cozumel and really enjoy the beach. And then you start to picture yourself in that future that actually never happened. It's a mirage, but you start to imagine yourself there. And then they create a sense of this moment being extra special. And they'll do something like say, I've never met anybody like you it gets me the way that you do. I feel so understood. There's something very special about our connection. And then you end up feeling like the past, that they share a similar past, that they share this present moment with you, and then they share this imaginary future, and they've created this whole sense of having a history with you, as if they've been in your memories when they never really have. This is a very powerful technique that makes you feel incredibly connected, and on top of it, they're mirroring your body language. I don't know if you ever noticed that. Watch it. Next time you're in a gathering, watch how people sit. Look at your behavior. Have you crossed your legs? Is your legs pointing in one direction more than the other? What are you doing with your arms? Who are you turned towards, or which direction are you turned towards? People who are very good at mirroring will copy your body language. They'll sit the way that you're sitting, and they'll create with their body, with you, a closed circle. So it makes it feel like you and them are in this intimate connection and that you feel the symmetry. By the way, they've done studies of this, and they found that therapists who do this build faster rapport with their new patients. So some of this we do deliberately. I know some of it I did as a therapist as a way to build a fast connection so that you trust me. Because think about it. I want you to come into that first appointment and tell me things that you've never said to anybody before. And you don't know me. You're only assuming that I'm safe. You don't know that I'm safe. So I would use some of these same techniques in order to build a fast connection, to build fast rapport. But they have really gotten very sophisticated with this so that you feel like you've always known them when you actually haven't known them at all. That if I was to ask you to pull out a note card and write down everything that you actually know about this person, you don't know anything, essentially, because some of it's fabricated and they are copying you And they've created this false persona. And then wherever they leave the blank spot, use what's called positive projection. You fill in the gaps of your knowledge with information about yourself. So you assume because you're a trustworthy person, they're a trustworthy person, but you don't have any history to know that they're a trustworthy person. Maybe you assume that they're ethical around work and that they're a good worker. Well, you don't know that they actually are. You are, but so you fill in with your history as their history. So all of this creates this very powerful connection of this trust, so that when we do see a red flag, we then write it off as, oh, they're nervous, or maybe they had a bad day, or they must have had a hard day at work or whatever. We don't realize that it was actually a warning about something about that person, that you saw a little bit of the true persona. So that's stage one. Stage one, again, is a love bombing and idealization. And remember, did you hear the part about the fact it was idealization? It's not based on who you really are, and you're not getting to meet who they really are. They're presenting an idealized version of themselves, and you are also being idealized by them. They almost see you like a caricature, as if you stepped out of a Disney movie as a princess or a prince. They don't really see you, as a whole, authentic, kind of flawed, ordinary human being. So then stage two starts, which is then trust and dependency. That's when you start to turn to this person for emotional connection, approval, and even for your sense of reality. And they become your emotional anchor. I remember how mine did this. I was living at the time in Michigan, and we had a real fluky weather. It was rare. And in that rare weather, there was actually a tornado touchdown. And my ex called me and said, "Are you safe? Have you gotten into the basement and found a safe place to be?" And then he said, "I had the strongest urge to get in the car and start driving towards you. And then I realized that I'm so far away, I could never get there in time." And I thought, wow, I feel really special. Like this person actually wanted to come and save me. So they start to sort of insinuate themselves as the expert, as the go-to person, as the final word, as your support person. And they really, I think of, for example, Grey's Anatomy. Are you my person? They they create themselves as your person. And you really have this sense of like this enormous sense of trust and dependency, which is really primes you then for the next stages, because now it goes all downhill. And thank you guys for liking this and sharing this. I really appreciate you guys getting the word out about this, because I know you know somebody who may need to hear this today, who may say, "I think I'm in a trauma bond." And you can say, "Hey, Dr. McAvoy is going to be giving a quiz soon, so why don't you come and join it so you can hear the quiz to see if you score high enough on a trauma bond." So the next stage, the third stage, is criticism and devaluation. This is when they start to do, at first, by the way, it's subtle. It's not dramatic. I remember mine, I was building patio furniture, the kind that you buy in a box and you got to assemble. And I'm not big to reading instructions. I don't know if that surprises you or doesn't surprise you, but I was putting it together because to me, it's like, well, it's got two legs and it's got a back and a seat. What's so hard about it? And he came over and he said, "Well, did you start with the instructions? Did you count all the parts?" No. So he made me start over. Now, see, that was a little criticism. I wasn't looking for his expertise. I hadn't even invited him to help me. But they start out these little subtle digs and this constructive criticism, but soon that grows into open devaluation. Soon it becomes where they're mocking you, they're shaming you, maybe they're comparing you to somebody else. And what happens with that is it starts to lower your self-esteem. So you start to work harder for their approval, believing that you're the problem. So when he said that to me, was like, "Yeah, no, I didn't count the parts. What if it's short one? Maybe it is wise that I do consider looking at the instructions. Maybe that's not really smart of me not to do that." So it was subtle. It wasn't something that came out. If it had been ridiculous, I would have thought, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I ever consider that? But because it was subtle and based on reality, I thought, yeah, I could get into trouble. I have done that before, building something without reading instructions. Maybe I really need to do that. So that's the third stage, is criticism and devaluation. And then the fourth stage starts, which is the gaslighting and the reality distortion. And this is when they start to deny, twist, and rewrite events, leaving you doubting your memory, doubting your feelings, and doubting your own judgment. And the reason they do this, for one, is because they refuse to be accountable for anything, but they also want you to rely on them to define reality and and to give them the control. It increases their psychological control over you. So you start to not know what's true. Here's the thing about gaslighting. I think, and I would love to, I can't wait to talk to Dr. Robin Stern about this. I think in the early stages of gaslighting, when they're lying, because some form of gaslighting is deception. When they tell you something, you believe it's true because you don't know that it's not, but it makes you doubt something or changes your perception. I think I was gaslit in the beginning and had no idea that I was being fed lies. That I just thought he was, he's at work working really hard. And then if I got upset about it, he'd say, you should understand that work's really important to me and we'd want me to be successful here. That's gaslighting. But I didn't really know that. I didn't know that he was actually not at work and not working hard. But so I think sometimes gaslighting, you may not realize you're being gaslit, but you may not realize they're rewriting events and changing the narrative, but it still leaves you doubting. Doubting your memory and your feelings and doubting yourself. But it really increases you relying on them, which is the ultimate goal of it. The next thing is the intermittent reinforcement. And this is stage 5. This is when they start to kind of give you, like feed you, which is what we talk breadcrumbing. It's when you've had a bad stint and they break in with this moment of kindness or this connected moment, like intimacy, or they really praise you, and it's unpredictable, and it's usually after a period of mistreatment. And it feels so fantastic that you then get locked into an addiction. You then start striving for that next moment of kindness or reward. Thank you guys so much for the gifts today. I really appreciate it. So it really powerfully connects with you, because you've been living in the gaslighting, the criticism, the mocking, the devaluation, the minimization, and you get hungry, psychologically hungry. And when they do this, you don't see this as manipulation to keep you trapped in the relationship. Because think about it. If the relationship was just bad, 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 you would leave. In fact, they're very good at picking up when you're consider leaving. So when they start to feel that disease within you, that unrest, that things aren't good for you, that's when they'll interject these periods of kindness, intimacy, or praise. And it really keeps you trapped because it really keeps you confused. And it makes you work harder thinking, if maybe we get better, we can have more of that, and then we'll get on stable ground. The problem is there is no stable ground. And while this is happening, isolation's occurring. They have kind of subtly suggested that your friends and family aren't as good or safe as you imagine them to be. So you have been quietly being cut off from your friends and family. Here's one of the ways that my ex did this. Not only did he suggest that my friends and family are not as good as I thought they were, or as supportive of a relationship as I'd hoped that they would be, he would also just never give me any privacy. So whenever I made a phone call, it would be in front of him. And after I'd get off a call, I could tell he'd sort of inserted himself in the call by being invested. He would ask me questions like, who is that? What do they want? And then I'd have to answer. And I found myself not wanting to answer. So then I just stopped making phone calls. I stopped reaching out. It became easier not to have contact. Oh, I'm freezing. Thank you for telling me that. I know why. So let me fix this real quick. So it just became easier for me just to have contact with him because of that. So sorry for that, guys. I realized that on TikTok, I hadn't changed you guys over to Wi-Fi. So you should have a way better experience at this point. I always forget to do that, and I really need to not forget to do that. So all of this creates so much internal confusion, because when you got into that relationship and you started to see the real self, you started to realize this person was not as nice as you thought they were. Maybe you discovered you didn't know them at all, that they are a stranger. I remember when I found out the massive betrayal, I realized I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know what he was doing when he wasn't with me, that there were parts of his personality I was really unsure of, that he essentially was a stranger. By the way, when you discover that experience, that confusion, that's the first stage of cognitive dissonance. It creates such intense confusion. And then when you start to question, is the relationship savable? And you start measuring everything. Are they nice to me today? Are they in a good space to me for today or not? Is it bad enough for me to leave? All of that. It makes you feel bad that you just can't make a decision. And then that leads you into the next stage, which then is, you know what? I don't know why I'm not leaving. I don't know why I'm still staying. What's wrong with me? And you start to feel very defective, like there's something essentially just broken about you. And when this starts to happen, you then feel such a loss of self, such resignation. This is stage 7, that you just give up. You find that it's too hard. It's too dangerous. There's too much conflict. So you stop asserting your needs. You start really working hard not to trigger them. And you focus a lot on trying to keep conflict down and keeping the peace up as much as you can. And this just really wears on you, and it wears on your sense of self. It starts to make you feel with yourself like you're a failure, like you've betrayed yourself and you no longer trust yourself. And yet at stage 8, you still protect and defend them because you're addicted. And you find them yourself still craving their connection. And whenever there is a connection, you feel so relieved, and that you then start to justify their behavior to other people. And you don't tell people, you start to kind of curate the truth. You start not telling people what's actually happening because you know they wouldn't understand. So you then tell people only what you want them to know so that they don't know how bad that it really is. So those are 8 stages of a trauma bond. So why do narcissists and psychopaths do this at all? Why bother doing this? So we're going to talk about the reasons that predatory people create trauma bonds. Or how. I'm going to actually talk about how they create it. We're going to get into how they create it. They create an intense early attachment with you. And I already shared with you during the love bombing how that works. That high actually floods your neurological system with a lot of oxytocin and dopamine, which feels amazing. Oxytocin's involved with the connection. It's what you feel when you cuddle a baby. It's what you feel after you've been having physical intimacy. You feel very close to somebody. And the dopamine is the pleasure neurotransmitter. So this kind of connectiveness feels very, very incredibly satisfying, and it makes you feel like you have a soulmate, that you found someone who really understands you. And yet you're being conditioned because you know that they do this hot and cold behavior. They show up in an amazing way. I remember mine would periodic. We didn't do a lot of phone calling. He didn't like the phone call, and I wasn't a big phone caller either. And so he'd be gone for long periods of time. And then he would call me some evening and we'd have this half an hour, 45-minute conversation that was just incredible. It was extra special. And I'd walk away from it feeling like I was walking on cloud 9 and that maybe we were going to get better. Maybe something happened that would have changed the relationship to improve it, only to go back to not hearing from him for 8 to 12 or more hours. So I started to actually live with my phone right by me. I was so kind of anxious and worried about missing a moment with him that I would keep my phone in case he would somehow text. I was like almost as if I was trying to grab him in those moments. So they really manufacture an intense early attachment, but they're conditioning you with intermittent reinforcement that increases the attachment. It actually makes you crave them and seek them out. Because it's almost like pulling the lever of the slot machine after putting in maybe 100 coins and you're getting about ready to give up. And suddenly you hit the big jackpot and you really win big. And because of that, you think, well, maybe it'll come faster. Maybe I'll get another massive reward like this again. So it keeps you hooked, hoping for another really great moment. But the other really hard part about all of this is they're eroding your reality with the gaslighting. So you then don't really know what's real or true, and you start to not trust yourself in that process. After all, you pick this person and they tell you that they're right, and then when you don't go along and it turns out wrong, they make sure you know about that. And then on top of it, you when it does go well, it feels so great. You really want their approval and their acceptance. So you start to lean more heavily into them and more heavily. And on top of it, they're weaponizing your empathy. They have, every time something goes wrong, they position themselves as the injured one. If you bring up a conflict, you've hurt their feelings. You're accusing them of not being perfect. They can't ever live up to your expectation. If something goes wrong at work, people are attacking them. People are being unfair to them. So what they do is they share these sob stories and they twist the events on you so that you end up feeling like you have to save them. And then on top of it, they tell you some highly traumatic early story of their life. So it keeps you in rescue mode and feeling cruel when you set boundaries or you even think about wanting to walk away. And of course, because you're isolated, you don't have any external reality check. So their narrative, their story becomes the only voice, the only story that's in your head. You don't have anything else to validate it against, to know whether or not this is accurate or whether other people would feel the same way. You don't have any ability to check that. So this keeps you in a chronic state of anxiety because of their unpredictable moods, the constantly shifting rules or moving the goalpost. The sudden withdrawal of affection makes you just feel in the constant state of fight or flight. And so you're just looking for safety. You're just looking for the drama to calm down so that you can then, things can get on good footing. And of course, they always encourage you to defend them to other people. Mine in the beginning pulled me aside and said, remember, what happens between us should stay between us. Now, in a reasonable relationship, you don't want to walk around and triangulate and tell everybody your business. But on the other hand, sometimes it's good to get your girlfriend's opinion on something or to talk to a trusted confidant. But what they're doing is they're encouraging you to see other people as not trustworthy, that things really need to stay within the boundaries. I'll tell you, that's a classic move of an abuser. And what it does is it really keeps them from fewer consequences because nobody knows but you. And it deepens your loyalty because it feels like you and them against the world. So I want you to hear this. This is really powerful. Hang on, this is a hard truth. A trauma bond is not a side effect of a toxic relationship. It's the strategy. I'm going to say that again. The trauma bond is not a side effect of a toxic or narcissistic relationship. It's the strategy of an abusive, predatory person. They want you to be cycling between fear and relief. They want you to no longer trust yourself. They want you isolated from other people. And they want you to be in a closed system where escape feels not only impossible, but feels wrong. Did you hear me? That it feels wrong, like you're being disloyal if you think of leaving. Man, did I feel that way. I felt, even writing the book, Love You More, felt like a disloyalty. Like I was telling on him and that I was breaking the code. But I'll tell you, this person never had your back. They have never been loyal to you. The loyalty is only one direction, from you to them. And so it is very, very, I just need you to hear this. This is a strategy because so many of us come out of these relationships feeling sorry for these people. Some of them may have had really bad pasts. No doubt, absolutely. That could be absolutely true. But so have a lot of other people who don't do this. I have never created a trauma bond with anybody, and I haven't had it easy. I bet you, if you've had a bad past, you're not creating a trauma bond with somebody. This is a strategy to create a closed system so that escape feels impossible or wrong. If you take anything away from this, I want you to really hear that, because this is a big piece to helping you be able to break this. So why does this create such intense connection and confusion? Well, because the fear relief loop that you're in starts to feel like love. And the intermittent reward hooks the brain into a chemical addiction. And the gaslighting is scrambling your reality. And the emotional whiplash you're experiencing is intensifying the dependency. And as a result, you're experiencing a disorganized, fracturing sense of self. And it's developing the Stockholm effect, which is what Patty Hearst experienced with her captors. because your brain can no longer separate danger from safety when it comes from the same person. And that contradiction keeps you emotionally stuck while you're longing for them and fearing them, while you believe there's good moments somehow outweigh the bad, even when it actually doesn't. So I want to give you a trauma bond quiz. So I've asked you earlier to grab a pen and paper because you're going to need to score this. This is 15 questions. And I want you to answer the questions with often, sometimes, or rarely, or never. So it's 3 answers: often, sometimes, or rarely, never. Okay? So the 3 possible answers to these questions. Are you guys ready? We're going to take this trauma bond self-check together, and then we're going to score it together. Here's question number 1. Did you feel an intense emotional pull towards this person even when they've hurt you? Answer often, sometimes, or rarely/never. Number 2, do you find yourself defending their behaviors to others even when you know it's wrong? Often, sometimes, or rarely, never. Number 3, do you feel more focused on keeping them happy than your own needs and well-being? Again, the choices are often, sometimes, or rarely/never. Number 5, do you often feel anxious, unsettled, or on edge around them, but relieved when they're kind? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 6, do you second guess your own memory and perceptions of events after talking to them? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 7, do you feel like leaving would be wrong or a betrayal, even though you know you're being mistreated? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 10, do you keep hoping they'll return to the good version of themselves from the early days? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 11, do you feel your sense of self, values, opinions, or identity has faded in this relationship? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 12, do you avoid bringing up your needs or concerns to prevent conflict or punishment? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 13, do you experience more emotional highs and lows in this relationship than in your other ones? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 14, do you fear how they might react if you set a firm boundary or try to leave? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Number 15, do you feel confused about whether you're experiencing is love or control? Often, sometimes, rarely, or never. So now what I want you to do is I want you to count up the often responses. Actually, I thought there's going to be scoring. This is the scoring. How we score it is we're going to count the number of times you said often. So if you answered 12 to 15 of these questions with often, you're highly likely to be in a trauma bond. This is describing a relationship pattern that's very closely matched to those seen in a trauma bond. You're experiencing a lot of emotional dependency driven by cycles of harm to you, also then intermittent kindness that's keeping you incredibly stuck and confused. If you answered 8 to 11 of them as often, this is a moderate sign of a trauma bond. There's some key bond dynamics are present. It may not be completely entrenched, but I want to warn you, these patterns can escalate over time. If you've answered 4 to 7 of these questions with often, then you're possibly either in the early stages of bonding or in a relationship that has a lot of unhealthy dynamics. So it's either it's an early stage of a trauma bond, or it's simply just not a very healthy relationship. And then if you answered 0 to 3, that's low signs of a trauma bond. That suggests that it suggests you don't have a trauma bond, but I'm not saying there's not challenges in this relationship. So let's talk about, I want to talk about 2 things if we have time. First, I want to do why the confusion works to keep you trapped in this relationship, because I said that a component of a trauma bond is cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is just a fancy way of saying cognitive confusion. You don't know what's true or real. So why is there so much confusion in these relationships? Well, because the same person both feels like safety and feels like danger. I'll never forget, this is a great example. I had found out he'd texting again, somebody big in his life, his girlfriend, supposedly former girlfriend, although I don't think they ever broke up. I found out they were texting. We're in a therapy appointment. He's been confronted by the therapist, which really was, let me tell you, she barely even slapped his hand. So I'm broken and crying in the appointment. She asks him how he feels seeing me so broken and has him give me a hug. And as I'm hugging him, I think, you're the person who's hurt me and you're the person who's comforting me. I've been in this position way too long with way too many people to feel this kind of confusion of having the person who hurts me be the person who comforts me. Because that person is both, you want safety, but you also know that you're not safe with them. And it just leads you to feel extremely confused between them. Number two, it keeps you in this hyperscan mode. You can't predict what's next with this person. You don't know if they're going to be loving or cruel. And because of that, you stay on high alert. And you get more invested in reading their every signal and trying to figure out what's going to happen next. The gaslighting dismantles your self-trust because they deny everything. I had someone just tell me that they witnessed abuse of another person in front of them and their partner still denies that it happened. And they were there and saw it. But it starts to make you doubt yourself, you know? Have you ever seen that little old-fashioned clip of, it's a black and white movie where this woman walks in her husband in bed with somebody else and she goes, Larry, what are you doing? And this woman, they just calmly get dressed and get up and the woman disappears and walks out the apartment and he puts the bed back together and he says, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, what? You know, she's almost like doubting what she really saw because it feels so shocking. And now that it looks so ordinary, she's like, well, maybe I didn't see that. So it really dismantles your trust in yourself. The emotional highs feels like proof of love, but it's not. It's just relief from the pain. And your brain wants a solution, and it really wants to resolve tension in relationships. We're not wired to walk away. We don't like abandonment of any kind, not for ourselves, not for other people. We keep looking for a fix. That's a real natural bent of ours to want to fix. So you keep pouring all this effort into reconciliation. And of course, then they weaponize your hope. You know, they'll make small little improvements or a temporary apology or do some powerful thing in one moment of intense pain. And you'll think, oh, this is different. They've changed. It's going to be better. Not realizing this was just a strategy to keep you hooked. So what do you do? If you answered somewhere between 7 to 14 of that quiz that I gave as often, what's the next steps? Let's talk about this. I want you to first start naming what's happening. I want you to name what's happening. You know, put language to it so you can learn to know that this is not love, but rather this is a form of manipulation. This is a pattern of manipulation. And by the way, if you're really struggling with this, I would love you to join the Relationship Reset Workshop that starts September 16th. This is a 6-week program for 6 women, and we're nearly full. There's just a couple spots left. You sign up this week, you get a bonus 30-minute one-on-one with me for free. You get a bonus one-on-one with me for 30 minutes. We're going to be looking at how you're wired your brain for connection, how it's stolen your voice, how you're really struggling to be able to break the patterns out of fear and out of blurry boundaries or confusion. So if you would like individualized help in a context of a group, this is why it's called a workshop. We're going to workshop your problem at least 10 minutes every session so that you get individualized support and follow-up support between sessions. I hope you'd love to join me for Relationship Reset. I've made sure to include the link to it in the for those of you on some of the channels so you can be able to find it. You can always go to, of course, my profile and find the links there to find out more information about it. It starts September 16th. We meet for 6 weeks. It's for 6 women, and there's just a couple spots left. The second thing is, besides the first, which is name what's happening, I want you to track the pattern. I want you to start to keep a private log of events, both the abusive moments and the good moments, so you start to see the cycle clearly over time. Here's an example of one I recognize. Usually on the weekends, my ex would start a fight, and he would love to end the fight by stonewalling. And he would then leave for most of the night on either a Friday night or Saturday night. And you're like, yeah, we're all smiling because we know what he's really up to. So he'd be gone for most of the night. And then he'd come back, and on Sunday, he'd take me out shopping, of course, using my credit card because he didn't earn money. I made the money. So he would have me buy my own special gift as a kind of a nice Sunday day, almost as if it's a makeup. I started to see the pattern of that shopping trip wasn't a kindness. It wasn't evidence of love. It was manipulation. This guy was trying to keep on my good side by buttering me back up and starting the week off on a good foot so that it was not on a bad note after he spent the weekend doing what he wanted by creating a fight. So track the patterns. Number 2, name what's happening. Number 2, track the patterns. Number 3, anchor yourself in outside reality. I want you to start to find one safe friend. Maybe join this survivor support group like the Toxic Free Relationship Club. We have 4 tiers in there. There is a tier in there that you can afford. And if you want to join at the premier level, which is 6 weekly group coaching offered every week, I offer financial assistance to anyone who asks. Or maybe you want to follow a credible abuse education resource page or person, but find an outside reality to anchor yourself in. I know a lot of you here, that's why you're here. You're here anchoring yourself right now by listening to this podcast. This interview or this live. Number 4, I want you to start separating the words from their actions. Apologies, promises, all that gobbledygook of words is just what they're doing to rehook you. Ask yourself, has their behavior changed consistently over time, or is it just temporarily? Because it is the action, a consistent action over time that tells you the truth of whether or not this person's actually making the changes and doing the hard work or whether or not they're just feeding you another line. That's number 4. Number 5, rebuild your self-trust in small ways. Start honoring small decisions for yourself. Maybe you delay responding to them. You don't jump when they call. Maybe you start to not trying to defend yourself every time they put you on the spot. You remember Jade. You don't just justify, don't attack, don't defend, and don't explain. Maybe you go out and you have an afternoon for yourself with somebody you really enjoy, but start to rebuild small trust, self-trust in small ways. Number 6 is reduce your emotional exposure to this person. They want you to keep riding that high and low. That keeps you hooked. But I want you to start to think about how you can pull back emotionally. I know that when you're in the relationship, it's trickier because you're still in the relationship. But maybe start to do a little more things on your own or for yourself. Maybe you start to be less invested in their approval. I remember saying to myself, whenever I faced a decision, you don't need his approval. Don't ask him. Ask somebody else. Or when he would express something that he was upset with me about, I'd say, his opinion is not important. Other people's opinion is more important. And most important, your opinion, my opinion. I would say to myself, Carrie, your own opinion is the most important here. So start to find ways to increase your emotional distance. In other words, reduce your emotional exposure. That's number 6. And number 7 is plan for breaks in contact. Even for a brief period, go out with a friend, go have a cup of coffee, maybe take a walk, find ways to recalibrate yourself so that you're not living in a constant state of tension. Obviously, getting out and leaving and going no contact or low contact is the best, but we're not all able to do that. But really consider how you can find ways to take breaks from this person. So let me review these steps again. I want you first to name what's happening, number 1, to track the patterns. Number 3, anchor yourself in outside reaction. Number 4, separate the words from their actions. Number 5, rebuild self-trust in small ways. Number 6, reduce your emotional exposure. Number 7, plan for breaks in contact with this individual. I know this is tough, guys. This was one of the toughest things I have ever done in my life. I've had more than one trauma bond. I was still trauma bonded to a family member when I was in that toxic relationship. And I found that when I broke it with my ex, it broke with this other person. They both broke at the same time. And I feel free. It's an amazing feeling. I described it in the beginning, if you missed it, where it feels like he's a distant memory. I forget he exists. He's not on top of mind anymore. And I know that a lot of us, when we're in that relationship, somebody just wrote, I feel like I'm going to die if I leave. I understand that feeling. When I was in that relationship, I really wondered if I would make it. I worried whether I was going to make it by staying because it was taking such a toll on me. But I also really worried about whether I could make it if I left. So I totally understand this intense connection that we feel. They did that. Remember, this is a strategy. It's not a side effect of a troubled person. It's the strategy of a troubled person. All right. Thank you so much for this education. Next week, I know it's the day after Labor Day, we're going to talk more about cognitive dissonance. So you want to really dig deep into the confusion. What is the confusion? Why does it feel so powerful? Why can't we make a decision and stay stuck so long? I hope you join me next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. But now, this is my time to be able to turn it over to you to talk about your questions. So maybe you have a question about this or something else. I would love to hear from you today about what is it that you're struggling with. So anything psychology related or mental health related, I'd be happy to address. But I also, love talking about abusive relationships and how to break free. So what things have been on your mind lately? Yeah, so somebody just said I was trauma bonded to my mother for 47 years, and I finally went no contact. It was the hardest decision of my life, but the best thing I've ever did for myself. That's amazing. I love hearing that. It is so powerful when we feel the power of ourselves, when we take back and we really show self-compassion for ourselves. I know not everybody is able to leave. I know that. And maybe you can't leave. I get that. But taking all these small steps is really a very strong way for you to say to yourself, you matter. You matter. So somebody else just said, I can't break free no matter what. But there are ways that you can show yourself that you do still matter. Maybe it is that you make your favorite meal. Maybe it is that you go out and for an afternoon and with a coffee with a good friend. Maybe it is the next time this person starts to lose it, you say to yourself, that is not my problem. I did not create this. All these little small sort of things that you kind of spaces, emotional spaces you throw in is really great for you to take incremental power back, incremental control back. So I know that feels really tough, but I want you to think about those are the small wins that are happening in your life. I have a question for you. I'm going to be building a course, a low entry course. It's going to be very affordable. And I want to base it around the things that you guys struggle with in the first days to 6 to 8 months of leaving a toxic relationship. So if you were to be interested in getting access to a course, what is it that you would love me to address in it? Things that I'm thinking of practical things like, how do you stop thinking of this person? And what do you do when you don't trust to get out and don't trust leaving the house or meeting anybody new? I'm not even talking dating. I'm just talking about even meeting your neighbor. Maybe it is that you can't stay off their socials. You should, but you can't. Maybe it is you find yourself following every narcissistic abuse expert and you're staying up way too late watching movies. But tell me your biggest problems that you would like solutions to. I would really love to create a course that's applicable to you, that's very down to earth and right where you need it, that helps you with this day-to-day practical issues that we all battle. Yeah, I want to know how to trust myself. And yeah, it's really hard because one of the reasons that we don't trust ourselves is we think to ourselves, well, I picked them and I thought they were a good person. What did I miss? What's wrong with me? And so we end up thinking that maybe all our decisions because of that are bad. That actually isn't true. Remind yourself, this person deceived you. They deceived you. If they came to you and said in the beginning, listen, I'm a very negative person. I'm easily bored. I betray all the time. I'm never loyal to anybody. I'm not ever going to be all in on this relationship. And when things get rough, I'm going to either yell at you, threaten you, become a menace, scare you, intimidate you, or I'm going to stonewall you. Would you said, yeah, sign me up for that. I want that relationship. No, of course not. Of course you wouldn't have. I need help with the narcissistic abuse and parental alienation with my kids, and now they're adults. Can you please help me? That's very tough. It's almost such a big question. It's very hard for me to answer on this forum because it would take probably hours to get into what actually happened. My short answer to this is find ways for you to be able to create connections with your adult children today. Maybe there's a baby born, a grandbaby born, send a card, make sure a gift is sent. Find ways that are not whiny, victim oriented, complains about the partner. Don't pull them into any conflict. Just show up in a very positive way and let them know that you're there and that you love them. That's where I would start. Is there something about a person that attracts narcissists? Yes and no. And the short answer to that, narcissists are always on the lookout for somebody that can act as supply that makes them feel better. And they really actually see the whole world that way. They're playing to the whole, have you noticed? They're playing to the whole world. So it isn't just that you're the only target. That's why there's a smear campaign, and that's why their family is often involved, is because they are also weaponizing those individuals, and they've groomed them to not take them on, not to challenge them. But yes, there also are things about some of us that make us more vulnerable. If you're in a big transition in your life, like you're in a move or you started a new job, or maybe there's been a big loss in your life, they spot that. They spot that we're in a transition, and they spot that we're isolated and that we're kind of unsure of ourselves and we're a little on shaky ground. There's also some personality traits. It came out of a research project by Sandra L. Brown in 2014 at Purdue University. She finds those of us who are more agreeable and conscientious are better marks for narcissists and psychopaths. And the cognitive dissonance is more intense for us, making it very difficult for us to leave. Now, how do they know that about you? Well, when they know that you're long-suffering and that you stick in there and that you believe in the good of people, then they know that you're going to stick around and work real hard for this relationship. They know that they won't, but that means that they know that they're going to be able to control you and get you to stay longer because they're going to really lean into your personality traits. So those are some of the things that really increases vulnerability. If childhood trauma destroys neural pathways, can those pathways be repaired? That's an interesting question. I don't know the research, Kate, off the top of my head. But I do know this. Your brain is always wiring itself constantly. So the neurons that it has, it doesn't really grow new neurons particularly, but it does grow new pathways. So you may have a set amount of cells in the brain, and that are there and continue to be there, but it will continue to wire itself in new ways. Think of it like telephone wiring. So the more that you use certain strategies and habits and problem-solving skills, the more those pathways get built for efficiency. Your brain's all about as low use of glucose as possible, and the way to do that is to be highly efficient. It's a very resource-hungry organ of the body, so it's all about efficiency, and you can use that by really focusing on new habits, helpful strategies, good problem-solving strategies. That can help you build new pathways. Consciousness is an interesting aspect. We often become hyper-vigilant because of the abuse we suffer from them. I'm going to flip it and say it in another direction. One of the things that happens to victims is they become risk avoidant. That came out of the study of Sandra L. Brown. You're more hesitant to take risks because you taking a risk and getting into that relationship got you into that relationship. And then you discovered the world is not as safe as you thought. I don't know how many of you have told me that. And I often say it to you. I feel the same. I see the world differently. I used to think the world was basically one big happy sandbox that we're all in. And now I know that's not true. Now I know that there are very, very dangerous people. What I used to thought was only confined to movies, I now know are not confined to movies. The movie reflects real life. If somebody can think of it as a plot for a movie, it's because somebody has done it in real life. And now that I know that, I now feel more hesitant about some of the chances I want to take. I'm less open. It's a little harder to do new things. I'm slower to make relationships, but I'm not for sure that's all bad. I know that a lot of victims afterwards, survivors afterwards, feel like the fact that we make people earn trust means we're paranoid. No, that's not being paranoid. That's just being smart. Paranoid is seeing a dark thing around every corner, and you look for it. It's not only seeing it, but you look for it. You anticipate, but we're not anticipating that. It's that we now know there's actual danger and we're a little slower to invite somebody into our house. It's just a completely different way. I know it feels unfamiliar because it's not the way you used to think. So that's why it doesn't feel good when you're doing it in the beginning. Yeah, somebody says, I won't risk that again. I almost lost everything. There were some decisions that I have made too, that when I look back, like I was quick to share. I still am learning on this one. I was quick to share my business, quick to share my success. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a little slower to ever do that again. I'm more likely to I'm going to hold on to this. I prefer it. I like doing that, but making him a partner of my company was a mistake. And it just does not bode well when I've done that. So I'm a little more hesitant to do that in the future. Sorry about that. Ever since I came back from the trip with kind of a low grade something. Didn't feel really great the first week. And now it's kicked up my asthma. So that's what you're hearing. And I apologize. It's really affecting my voice. And of course, in Texas, everybody is moving into fall in the northern hemisphere. And that for me is a harder time of year. I have more allergies because of that. And I hear it in my voice. It's really bugging me today. I hope the quality's been okay for you guys. And one of you has commented on how bad the audio is. And I hope I've corrected it. I hope it's a lot better audio experience for those of you who are on the other channels besides TikTok. I'm going to have to get really careful about what I say because of being on a TikTok live these days. Because the new guidelines are coming out in September, and man, they're brutal. They're really going to be easy to break. So it's tough. I'm sad about that, actually. Oh, the forest smoke. Oh, there's a big fire in some areas. That would be tough. That would be tough. Yeah, that would bother me because I'm really prone to lung issues and breathing issues. Great. I'm glad it's good. I really tried to make your audio last week was only on one side. I had a wrong setting selected, and so I've corrected that. I really spent some time trying to fix about why is it coming in on one side and it sounds lopsided. So I hope I've fixed and you guys can hear me on both channels now, on right and left ears. So that's awesome. So yeah, any other questions for me today before we wrap up? We've got a couple more minutes before I'm going to head out and go to my Toxic Free Relationship Club coaching call. Yeah, I hoped I fixed it. I took you off. You were on cellular and now you're on Wi-Fi, but my Wi-Fi has gotten not good lately here. I'm really disappointed in the Wi-Fi. I'm out kind of on the outskirts of Austin, which is, it's not as stable if I was downtown Austin. So, yeah. If you're not on TikTok, you have a better connection because you guys are on Ethernet. So it's a very stable. Oh, you envy my tech skills. Yeah, I do. I do wear all the wigs and I wear the wigs. I wear all the hats and the wigs in this business. I do have a VA and I do have a video editor, but I do a lot of the nuts and bolts. I don't have anybody who does the production work. I do all that myself. So, but if you want, I can say this week because we're still not into the new guidelines though, TikTok. If you want a better experience, join me on Facebook or YouTube. You'll get a better experience over there. And I stream the same thing everywhere. So any last questions for me today? Be sure to check out the podcast with Dr. Nadine Macaluso. For those who don't know, she wrote the book Run Like Hell. She is the former wife of the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, the real wife of the Wolf of Wall Street. They're divorced, obviously. And she has an amazing platform. And it's a great interview, really deep interview. So if you want to even dissect trauma bonds even further, be sure to check it out. It's Exposing Love Bombing and Trauma Bonds, and it's this week on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. Also, I only have a couple spots left for the relationship reset, and this is the last week for the bonus one-on-one, 30-minute one-on-one. I would love to work with you for 6 weeks. It starts September 16th. So, Carrie, do you feel they can still love you if they jump into another relationship? Who can love you? Who do I think can love you? I think anybody who jumps into another relationship might not love you. Dr. Nadine Macaluso, she goes by Dr. Nay, N-A-E, Dr. Nay, Dr. Nadine Macaluso. Check out the Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse podcast. It's out of hiatus. We're back on. This week is with Dr. Nay. Can narcissists love? No, I don't think narcissists love in the way that you and I love, because they aren't willing to risk themselves with anybody else. They don't really want you to know them. Intimacy, which is love, takes seeing into somebody. They don't want you seeing into them, because then you're going to see the deception, and they don't want that. Well, guys, this has been an amazing conversation. Trauma bonds is always something that's very powerful. I find it a very evocative subject. I'm thrilled that you joined me today to talk about this together. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this. And join me next week to talk about cognitive dissonance, why there's such intense confusion. We're going to get into all the nuts and bolts of that. So I'll see you next week.